some feedback from you first. Please, those who have taught English to beginners, raise your hand. Okay. Now, one more time. Now that you told me that you have taught English to beginners, I want you to tell me, please raise your hand if you have ever used Spanish while teaching English to beginners. Okay, not so many hands. The first question. Two more questions. Raise your hand if you think, in general, not only for teachers but also for you students. Raise your hand if you think that using Spanish in a class, it's a good idea. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. And the last one, raise your hand then if you think that it's not a good idea to use Spanish in an English class with beginners. Okay, good. So this is what we are going to talk about. Well, first of all, we need to consider that during our profession you will encounter different kinds of group, different levels. You're going to work with different levels. We have two possible scenarios. One is that maybe for some reason you are lucky and you are sent abroad to teach English in a different country to people with a different mother tongue than yours, that would be different from Spanish. That is one scenario. I don't want to work on that. I would like to work on linguistically homogeneous classes, which is what we are going to have here working in Mexico. Students whose mother tongue is Spanish. This is what we are going to develop throughout this talk. And well, here we have some familiar images that some of you can identify. First we have a teacher, then we have a student. And well, the first question is, should we use Spanish while teaching English? The answer varies from one classroom to another. I think that you can make use of Spanish, especially with beginners. And this is what I'm about to explain. Of course, the main goal in each classroom is to make students speak English. Since the first day, since the very first day of classes, they can tell you his or her name, their interests, until more advanced lessons. But well, we need to consider that there is always a controversy to decide if we are going to use Spanish or not. The primary role of Spanish in this context, of Spanish in an English class, would be to lower affective filters. Okay, we need to talk about this. Lowering affective filters and make students feel comfortable, not stressed, not bored. And this will be done throughout comprehension. Comprehension not only of the language, which is L2, but also comprehension of the procedures that take place in your class. And well, if we are talking about affective filters, we need to talk about Krashen's monitor model. This model basically talks about that students will filter or block out the target language, in this case English, if they become tense, angry, or bored. This is very common during the first weeks of work, during the first week of classes with beginners. Okay? So, in my experience here in Acatlán, especially in SEI, I can say that I had this idea that I had to make them speak in English since the very first day. And during these years, I have proved that this is not always the best option for them. I remember that one time I started a group with 25 students, approximately, beginners, of course. And when I realized the second week of classes, I had like 15. So 10 of them had dropped the course. And that's when I realized that maybe my approach and my resilience to use Spanish was affecting the way I was working with them. So that's why, since that point, for me, that was a turning point. That's when I decided to not to be so resilient to using Spanish, and I try to integrate Spanish to make them comprehend not only the language but the procedures, the instructions, what I expect from them. And well, returning to this idea about Krashen's monitor model, the affective filter is basically you have to create a nice, relaxed environment for them so they can be interested in the language. Students must understand, must comprehend what is happening inside the classroom, not only for the language, which is the happening administratively and pedagogically, but also you need to be very, very careful with instructions for them to understand what they are going to do. And well, another aspect of this Krashen's hypothesis is that they must face comprehensible input. The optimal learning, or to be more accurate, optimal acquisition, which is what Krashen talks about, is that this learning will occur when the students can understand most of the input, and this is what he calls I+1, where I represents the current level of your students, and number 1 represents the level beyond the current competence of your students. So of course, the classroom is always, and the language will always be a challenge for them, but it has to be a gradual process. If it's too much, if it's too challenging for them, they will end up frustrated, angry, or sometimes bored, and we don't want that. And well. Okay, so what happens when we try to run faster than our students can? They are going to face not I+1, they are going to face I+2, I+3, and that's exactly what we don't want. Also, when we talk about understanding and comprehension of the classroom environment, we talk about cultural identity. Cultural identity refers to students. Sometimes it's proven in some research that students feel more comfortable when the teacher speaks their mother tongue. Classroom management has to do with I have already mentioned, which is to make them to make the instructions very clear for them so they can follow you in the class. Comprehension checks. I mean, once in a while you can carry out these techniques so as to make sure that they are understanding the topic. One example would be, okay, you are working with a specific tense, but how would you say this in your mother tongue to make sure that they are understanding what they are saying? And also, students' request for clarification. The student is, sometimes you talk, and you don't even know if they are understanding what you are saying, and they don't say anything because they are afraid. They are afraid to be embarrassed in front of everybody or something like that. And that's when we talk about language anxiety. This is a very normal thing. Well, the moment we enter a classroom, the moment we step into a class, we always face anxiety. It doesn't matter if it's English, French, or math, or whatever. We have always faced this natural anxiety when we start studying a topic or a subject. And of course, English is not the exception. The absence of students L1, in this case Spanish, when explaining the unfamiliar, can raise the level of anxiety. And we have three different aspects about language anxiety. One is communication apprehension. This is when students are really, really afraid of not being able to communicate what they want. The second would be fear of negative social evaluation, which is to talk in front, to speak in front of the group and be embarrassed for not constructing grammatically correct sentences. And the third one is test anxiety, which is something we have always experienced when we present a test. Especially for students, for beginners and for starters, we need to, when they are taking a test, we need to explain them. We need to explain to them the instructions very clearly, because maybe that is the problem, that they are not getting a good grade because the instructions were in English, and if you write on an exam choose the best option, and then you will write a sentence that they won't understand that. Okay, so that's why I have seen that sometimes in exams for beginners, for starters, the instructions are in Spanish, so they can have a very clear picture of what they are going to do. And then the question would be, okay, of course the students must speak as much as possible, because for some of them that's the only chance they have to practice English. Maybe 1 hour or 2 hours, which is the duration of the class. That's the only chance they have to practice. So using Spanish will be like ambiguous, right? So okay, it has to be gradual. It has to be an scaffolding process, and of course you need to teach them to use another resources to communicate or to convey a message. And that's when we talk about communication strategies. For example, I would like somebody to tell me, what do they do when they don't know how to express an idea in English? I have here some of my students, and I would like them to, I would like somebody help me to answer this question. For example, Julie, what do you do when, although you are an advanced student, what do you do when you are not able to convey a message, when you don't find the words?
As a teacher?
As a student?
I try to use synonyms first, if possible, or I start like going around the idea. Sometimes I move, like now. Mm-hmm. And sometimes when I really don't know what to do, I use Spanish. And it's funny because it's something I do and the students do it as well. I use Spanish but with an English pronunciation.
Mm-hmm.
I feel frustrada. It's like and they do that. They try to use what they know, and what they don't know, they use it in Spanish. But I think that's the way they start getting around it, like Bochan.
Okay, good. For example, Luz, what can you tell me? What do you do? I know you are such a good teacher. What do you do? Do you use Spanish, or what do you do when you have this situation?
Well, certainly there are these kind of rules in which you say only English spoken here.
Exactly,
right?
exactly.
And if you break the rule, then what are you going to show them, right? But it happens, and I think that you have to be humble in order to help them understand how can they convey an idea. Maybe synonyms can be a good idea, or maybe just to have this general word or question, because they were asking, how can I say, ¿cómo puedo describir a alguien que es alto pero fornido? And I was like, okay, this is very difficult because I don't know how to say fornido right now. And I was like, okay, you can say that he goes to the gym.
Exactly.
And then I changed it.
Exactly.
And he was like, okay.
Exactly.
But then I said, I didn't answer the question because I didn't say how to say fornido. But I think that Spanish is a great tool in order to help them understand what they are about to learn.
Exactly. Thank you very much, you too. That's what I'm mentioning here about communication strategies. Okay. Gradually, you're going to reach a point where Spanish won't be allowed in your class. That's a rule. You are going to reach a point where Spanish is not acceptable. So what are you going to do to help them to communicate or to convey a message? Well, you can work with different communication strategies, as they have already mentioned. As you can see, more teaching communication strategies, less Spanish in this context. Synonyms is a good idea. Antonyms is another one. Gestures, and also periphrases, which is what you already said. Okay, you don't know how to say this. Okay, but this is a thing you use to what? To keep what? Papers. Okay, and then they can work with more vocabulary. But you need to foster this these kind of strategies in your class, not also with beginners, also with more advanced students. I have experienced this situation, although they are advanced. When you ask them for a definition, they know the word, and I say, okay, for example, what is this? This is computadora. Yes, but give me the definition. What is your definition of this subject? And that's important, because they have to construct a meaning. Not only know what it means, they have to construct their own meaning. It's a machine, it's an equipment you use for blah blah blah. So this is a communication strategy. I think it's the most used communication strategy here. And well, just to finish this, I would like to say that the use of English in this case should be maximized whenever possible. Every moment of the class, each class must revolve around the use of English. And well, the main role of Spanish is primarily just to supply scaffolding to lower affective filters. And here the affective filters are so important in a class. They become angry, tense, disappointed the moment they realize that they don't understand a thing, and that's what we don't want them to think. Okay, and well, how can we do that? Well, by making the class and the procedures of the class more comprehensible for them, the activities, the instructions, and the procedure. And well, maybe the secondary role for Spanish will be helping them to attain the concepts of Spanish through our loan words, translation activities maybe. Translation activities are not that bad, because that's the way you make sure that they understand what the tense and what the concept is about. And code switching, which is you already mentioned, and well, it's the storytelling activities. You can use different strategies to make them produce more English and speak less Spanish. That was very brief, I think, but I think just in perfect time. Now I would like to know if you have some question about this. Yes.
Have you ever tried